Tonight, the promised Republican red wave was more like a puddle. I'll take you through last night's U.S. midterm election results. It's November 9th, and this is the Ezra Levant Show. This free episode of the Ezra Levant Show is brought to you by...
Freedom in 2022 is certainly about being able to make free choices for ourselves and for our family, who we believe are the best. We have seen so much suffering over the last 2 years. People who die alone in terrible conditions, people losing dream jobs, polarized families, and a society that insult and yell at each other for making a different medical choice. But people have risen, and it will be through them that the future will have an important meaning for all of you, but especially for the next generation. Rebel News has been present at every step of this great challenge, but so many other pioneers whom you could meet and hear at our great conference about freedom for our beautiful country, which is Canada. This conference, which will be held in Calgary and Toronto, will show you the faces of the influence of freedom that you have seen over the past 2 years. You don't want to miss this, so get your ticket now at rebelnewslive.com. And it will be a pleasure to see you there and meet you in large numbers. It's time to drop these masks and let the truth shine.
Shame on you, you censorious thug.
Well, I was pretty optimistic heading into yesterday's midterm elections in the U.S. I felt optimistic for a number of reasons. Not optimistic about the course of the United States. Most Americans felt like the country was on the wrong track. We took you through that detailed New York Times poll a couple of weeks ago. And the reason I refer to it as a New York Times poll is because if liberals are saying the country is upset with a Democratic president, you know it's true. And I thought combined, the bad economy, dangers in foreign affairs, and Joe Biden's poor personal performance, I thought that is going to be a banner year for Republicans. And indeed, the pollsters seem to say so. And the phrase red wave was in headlines everywhere. Makes sense. The economy, jobs, inflation, that's what people care about versus, well, what exactly does Joe Biden offer? Wokeism, reminders of the pandemic and lockdown. Biden has those awful cognitive moments where he's blurry. He feels every day of his 78 years of age. He actually feels like he's 88. Wars in the background in Ukraine, China saber-rattling, the embarrassing and costly exit from Afghanistan, North Korea being more belligerent. It should have been a great election for the Republicans, but it fizzled. They're still tabulating the votes in certain areas. It looks like the Republicans will retake the House of Representatives, which is important. Looks, though, like they're just tied in the Senate. Could go either way. So much for the red wave. The star of the evening was clearly Ron DeSantis of Florida, the governor. Here's the front page of the New York Post. I think they're exactly right. He won with a nearly 20-point margin over his rival, Charlie Crist. Take a look at this graphic from the exit polls. Latino voters didn't just like Ron DeSantis, they loved him. Obviously, Cubans, they're against socialism, but even Puerto Ricans and other Latinos were for Ron DeSantis, the Republican. You know, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez is a white person's idea of what Latinos want. Ron DeSantis is a Latino person's idea about what Latinos want. He doesn't use ridiculous words like Latinx. He doesn't pander with open borders immigration. He just gives them good government and freedom. It's amazing. He lifted the whole state with him, and incredibly, he won Miami-Dade County. Overwhelmingly Hispanic, used to be the Democrat Party's firewall in that state. Now it's a more conservative state than Texas. Let that sink in. the Republican margin in Florida was much higher than it was in neighboring Texas. Here's a clip from DeSantis' speech last night. He looked great with his family, his wife, Casey, who has recovered from cancer. Take a look at that lovely family. What a moment.
Well, thank you so much. You know, over these past 4 years, we've seen major challenges for the people of our state, for the citizens of the United States, and above all, for the cause of freedom. We saw freedom in our very way of life and so many other jurisdictions in this country wither on the vine. Florida held the line. We chose facts over fear. We chose education over indoctrination. We chose law and order over rioting and disorder. Florida was a refuge of sanity when the world went mad. We stood as a citadel of freedom for people across this country and indeed across the world. We faced attacks. We took the hits. We weathered the storms, but we stood our ground. We did not back down. We had the conviction to guide us, and we had the courage to lead. We made promises. We made promises to the people of Florida, and we have delivered on those promises. And so today, after 4 years, the people have delivered their verdict. Freedom is here to stay.
If you ask me what Ron DeSantis stands for, if you ask anyone, I think it's easy to answer. He stands for freedom, as opposed to the authoritarian approach of the lockdowns. He's against wokeism. He's for law and order. He's a policy man, and he also has a style of firmness. He doesn't pander to the media. He doesn't mess around with powerful interests. When Disney took a run at him, he took away Disneyland's special legal status without blinking. Oh, you can't do that. Well, he did. That was the bright part of the map for the Republicans. Other parts were terribly disappointing. John Fetterman, who was running for the Senate in Pennsylvania, had a stroke a few months ago, and for a while he kept it secret. Then it was revealed. He can't form full sentences. He can't understand things. He needs them written out, typed out in a kind of walking subtitle machine. He was up against a slick and telegenic Republican named Dr. Oz from TV. And Fetterman, with a stroke, won in Pennsylvania. How? Arizona, another state the Republicans thought they could pick up. Blake Masters, a freedom-oriented America Firster affiliated with Peter Thiel, the only libertarian in Silicon Valley. He ran and didn't win. Carrie Lake ran. Now, it's still so close for Carrie Lake, and she's fighting that. Again, what kind of a country takes so long to count their ballots? New York State, one of the most progressive places in America. Wow. Lee Zeldin, the Republican contender, came very close to knocking off the appointed Democrat governor. Remember, she took over after Governor Cuomo had Me Too'd himself out of office. Now, I went to bed last night disappointed that Zeldin's insurgency wasn't successful, but I'm reminded that more than 1 million votes were not yet counted last night. Is this a third world country where they just have 1 million votes sitting around? The state of Georgia has been painful for any Republican. It was the site of a double loss in 2020. 2 seats went Democrat that day. One of them was up again last night. The Republicans ran Herschel Walker, a former football star. He did not win, but neither did the Democrat, Raphael Warnock, who both of them were just under the 50% mark. In Arizona law, if you don't win 50%, they have a runoff again. So there will be another election. I am not optimistic. Interestingly, in a statewide vote, the one where Herschel Walker did not hit 50%, the Republican governor did. He actually won fairly handily. How did the local governor win as a Republican, but Herschel Walker did more poorly than him? But back to what I said earlier, what's up with not knowing the results in hours? I take it that that Georgia law says there has to be a runoff. That's not a problem with counting. But how is it that you have 1 million uncounted votes in New York? How is it that Arizona says they're going to need days or even weeks to count? I saw this video go up yesterday in the middle of the day, and I thought, they're getting started already. Take a look at this.
Hello, Maricopa County. I'm Bill Gates, the chairman of the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors.
And I'm Stephen Richard, the Maricopa County Recorder.
And we're here to give you an update on how things are going so far with the election. We've already had almost 44,000 people show up this morning, check in, and be available to vote. And things are going great out there, but there's one thing that we wanted to address to make people aware of today, and that has to do with our tabulators. We've got about 20% of the locations out there where there's an issue with the tabulator, where some of the ballots that after people have voted them, they try and run them through the tabulator and they're not going through. But the good thing is we do, first of all, we're trying to fix this problem as quickly as possible. And we also have a redundancy in place. If you can't put the ballot in the tabulator, then you can simply place it here in where you see the number 3. And this is a secure box where those ballots will be kept for later this evening, where we'll bring them in here to Central Count to tabulate them.
So this would function much like early voting functions, in that we would get your ballot back. Once we've signature verified it, we would send it to our central tabulators. Ballots that are in here will already be, in effect, signature verified, so we won't need to confirm identity, but we will central tabulate them. This is actually what the majority of Arizona counties do on election day all the time.
And just one thing to keep in mind, we have 223 vote centers across the county. So if there are lines at the location you're at or issues with the tabulator, if you would prefer to go to another location, you can do that. Doesn't matter where you go, as long as you're a registered voter here in Maricopa County. Thanks so much. And everybody, if you haven't yet, get out and vote.
What a joke. What a clown show. How about just using paper and pencil? You know, election integrity are 2 words you're not allowed to say. In fact, if you say them in the wrong way on YouTube or other social media, you'll get a strike. You'll be deplatformed. It's very strange. You're not allowed to say that U.S. elections are not reliable. At least you're not allowed to say that about the 2020 election. Democrats say that all the time about elections that Republicans win. I remember it first when George W. Bush beat Al Gore and they looked at the hanging chads, and that case went to the Supreme Court. For years, Democrats said that George W. Bush was not the legitimate president. They called him a usurper. That's all fine to say on social media, but you can't say that about Democrat shenanigans. I want to show you a quick clip from our live stream last night. I can't even believe this. No ID, just saying your name, saying your phone number or your address, and you vote. Take a look.
I don't think Canadians even realize when I went to vote today, all I was asked is, what is your last name? And then they're like, this is your first name. I'm like, yes. And they're like, this is your address. I'm like, yes. And then they just printed out a little receipt, had me sign it. And then I got my ballot and I voted and I put it in the scanner and I left. But who's to say it? If you know someone's first and last name and you know their address, what could stop you from voting for them? Because she didn't have a computer. It was like, just like a piece of paper with all the people in my area because I'm a smaller precinct. There was no voter ID check. There's none of that going on like it does in Canada. And I'm just shocked every time I vote here, being like, this is so weird.
Yeah, that really is weird. That's terrifying. I mean, you went in there in good faith and no shenanigans, but I could only imagine. So they literally didn't ask you for any card or any ID of any sort?
You don't need it. You just need to be registered to vote. And if you're registered to vote, you just go where you're supposed to go. Like, cause like you have them in for your specific area, you go there, you're on a list. They check you off that you've done it. You sign a little thing saying like, yep, this is me. And then you go and get your ballot.
Can you believe that? I can't. There's just, you need more ID to buy a lottery ticket than to vote. Now, Donald Trump was not on the ballot, of course, but he was certainly lurking in the background, and he stumped for Republican candidates around the country. Certainly, he was more welcome at Republican events than Joe Biden was at Democrat events. Now, today, Donald Trump was boasting, saying that the vast majority of candidates for whom he endorsed or campaigned won. And I think that is mathematically accurate. It's the exact same message that the New York Times has when they say 200 election deniers won. That's a term of art at the New York Times. They call anyone who doubts the results of the 2020 election, they call them election deniers, sort of like a Holocaust denier. That's their phrase. I think there's a symbiosis between Donald Trump and the liberal media like the New York Times. They love to fight each other. And so if Donald Trump says something to inspire his base, the New York Times says it to inflame their base in reaction. It's quite something. But it is a fact that key people that Donald Trump endorsed underperformed. Dr. Oz, the Republican candidate in Pennsylvania, how could he not beat a stroke victim? And the governor candidate of that state, how could he not win? Blake Masters and, of course, Herschel Walker, we mentioned before. I think one of the reasons is that Donald Trump keeps talking about 2020 and how he was wronged. And perhaps he was. I'm sympathetic to that. And that New York Times poll we went through the other week showed that probably about a third of Americans are sympathetic to that too. But relitigating the details, the ins and outs of that debate, that's inside baseball in 2022 in a country that is on the verge of a recession, has record inflation, and has real crises that affect real people. It was an interesting night. It was certainly not the success I hoped it would be for Republicans. And it makes me think, what will the big show in 2024 be like in the presidential season? On the one hand, you could have Ron DeSantis, a successful governor who can turn a purple state, as they call those sort of half and half states, into a red state with super majorities in the legislature. They can pass anything they want now. There are no statewide offices in Florida held by Democrats. Democrats are almost an extinct species in Florida. DeSantis has a strong media game. He's not a pushover. He's young, especially by comparison to Trump. He's very policy-oriented. He reminds me in some ways of Stephen Harper. He's not very cool and not very funny, but he's solid. Ron DeSantis was a winner last night, but he's not the most likely candidate for the Republicans. That's Trump himself, a man of controversy and division. Now, I love Trump. I was one of the few Canadians who saw in him the ability to beat the Democrats in 2015. I think we were really the only media outlet in Canada that was cheering for him. And that fit the times in 2015 and 2016. It was the right approach to beat Hillary Clinton, which he did, and I don't think any other Republican candidate would have. I loved many of the things he did as president, not all of the things, but many of them. And I think Republicans now are licking their wounds or counting their wins and thinking, which is the right candidate for 2024? Now, of course, it's possible that another possibility presents itself, another candidate, but I think DeSantis and Trump are the two serious contenders. Trump sees DeSantis looming behind him. We know that because at a rally this week, he gave DeSantis a mean nickname. Remember this?
Trump at 71, Ron DeSanctimonious at 10%, Mike Pence at 7. Oh, Mike's doing better than I thought.
He later pulled that back and he acknowledged that he, in fact, did vote for DeSantis. I don't know if you saw this clip here.
Did you vote for Governor DeSantis?
Yes, I did.
I think a lot of his own base said, why are you sniping at our most successful governor in America on the eve of an election? Trump, his whole brand, not just as president, but for years in business and showbiz, was Trump is a winner. Remember when he said you'll win so much with him, you'll get tired of winning?
If we want America to thrive in the 21st century, then we must stop running from the competition. And instead, we must start totally winning and winning and winning again. Remember when I used to say, we're going to win so much? We're going to win that the people of Missouri are going to go to your governor and they're going to say, Governor, please go see the president. We can't stand winning so much. Remember, I used to say that, right? I used to say it, and that's what's happening. That's what's happening. And then the governor's going to come to that beautiful historic Oval Office. He's going to say to me, Mr. President, the people of Missouri cannot stand all this winning. They don't want to win so much. They love the old way, where they had lousy job numbers, lousy economic numbers, lousy. They loved it. Please, Mr. President, please not. And I'll say, Governor, I don't care what they say in Missouri. We're going to keep winning and winning and winning and winning. Remember?
America loved to win. Make America Great Again was about winning wars, or better yet, not getting into them, about winning trade negotiations, about winning economically, about winning market share, about winning everything instead of losing or retreating. That's the Trump brand. That's his casinos. That's his luxury real estate and hotels. But what if Trump actually isn't a winner anymore? That would be like salt that loses its saltiness. What is left? If Trump isn't a winner, what's there? Which would you like to see in 2024? Would you like to see a matchup, a second matchup between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton? Oh, it's possible. It's possible. Which would be more likely to win, Trump versus Hillary round 2 or DeSantis versus Hillary? What if it was DeSantis versus his rival governor, California's Gavin Newsom? Would you like to see DeSantis in such a matchup? Would you like to see Donald Trump run against Newsom? In 2016, Donald Trump was the only Republican tough enough and smart enough and savvy enough to win, to beat the real enemy, not the Democrats, but the media party. Is that true now? Last night's results tell me that maybe it's not. And maybe Donald Trump, as great as he was and as accomplished as he is, maybe it's time for him to pass the baton to Ron DeSantis, a winner who wins. Stay with us for more. This free episode of the Ezra Levant Show is brought to you by
freedom in the year 2022, for me, folks, it means the return of Rebel Live. Now, Rebel Live is an annual event we used to put on before the man, or was it the COVID Karen, made us shut it down during the pandemic years. It is a freedom fun fest, if you will. All the freedom fighters you've grown to know and love over the years, they're going to be speaking at the Toronto and Calgary events. The Toronto event is on November 19th. That's a Saturday, and it will feature the likes of Dr. Julie Ponesse, Archer Pawlowski, Tamara Leach, and all your favorite rebels, including yours truly. I'll be the MC that day, Sheila Gunn Reid, and of course, the big boss man himself, Ezra Levant. Now Saturday, November the 26th, we're bringing Rebel Live to Calgary, and those aforementioned speakers will be there, and Sheila will be the MC for that event. You don't want to miss it. It's an all-day freedom fest. I know there are certain would-be conservative leaders that think freedom is overrated. You know, we don't think that way. I don't think you think that way. So if you want to get a ticket, and please go to the website. They are going fast. Go to rebelnewslive.com. That's rebelnewslive.com. Get your orders in, and as Billy Red Lions used to say, folks, don't you dare miss it.
Don't you dare miss this one.
Well, as you know, Rebel News has been focused on a number of stories like a laser, including the Trucker Commission of Inquiry in Ottawa. As you know, we've actually rented an Airbnb near the Commission of Inquiry that we've turned into a base camp and mobile studio. Well, it's not mobile, but it's a pop-up studio in Ottawa. Every night at 6 p.m. Eastern, we've had a live stream covering the events of the day, interviewing lawyers, witnesses, Tamara Leach, some of the truckers. It's been amazing. We've been focused on the U.S. election a little bit, and of course, some of our adventures overseas, including to the World Health Summit at Berlin and the C40 conference in Buenos Aires. But there are important subjects that I'm not sure if we've given enough attention to, and I think it's because the mainstream media and mainstream political parties don't really want to talk about them. And of course, our motto here at Rebel News is telling the other side of the story. So we believe in a diversity of opinions. And our next guest certainly fills those shoes. I'm talking about Maxime Bernier, the leader of the People's Party of Canada, who joins us now from Ottawa. Maxime, great to see you again. Thank you for taking the time. Appreciate you joining us. There's a lot of things to talk about that really aren't covered well in the mainstream. Am I right?
Yes, you're right, Ezra. And it's good that Canadians can turn to the Rebel News and listening the other point of view and the common sense point of view, I must say.
Well, I appreciate you joining us. One subject that I know we've talked about a lot in the past, including the Roxham Road open border. Well, Roxham Road has had tens of thousands of people cross it, but Justin Trudeau's government has announced his plans to legally bring in 500,000 immigrants a year, which is a stunning number. That's got to be more than any other democracy in the world. And I just think of how that would affect things from wages to housing prices. But I haven't seen any commentary or criticism of this from other political parties or even other mainstream media. What is your take? What is the People's Party of Canada's take on a record 500,000 migrants a year coming to Canada?
Yes, Ezra, I must say that you are right saying that, all these establishment national political parties, the Conservative, the NDP, and the Green, the Bloc Québécois, they won't speak about that. Each of one agreed with that position of 500,000 people starting in 2025. And for us, we are saying it's mass immigration. Yes, we must have sustainable immigration, but we believe that we must have lower immigration than that number. And actually, 500,000, it is the population of Newfoundland every year in Canada. Every year we'll have a new Newfoundland in Canada, starting at 2025. So that being said, they're saying always more and more people. It would be important for economic growth. You don't need to have more people to have prosperity and economic growth. There's small countries that are very prosperous. The most important is to increase our purchasing power, our standard of living, and if mass immigration were a solution for that. Trudeau started mass immigration in 2019 with 350,000 people and after 400,000 people. And we still have, inflation in this country and our purchasing power is going down. So what they're saying, more and more people will bring more prosperity. That's not the case.
You said it's like bringing in a new Newfoundland every year. That's statistically right. But of course, they're not going to Newfoundland. I think the majority of them are going to Toronto, Vancouver. Some French-speaking migrants would probably go to Montreal. So they're really going to the big cities, which is understandable because many of these folks are coming from ethnic communities that they would probably want to live in or amongst or near. So what you're really doing is you're pouring probably 300, 400,000 of these people into the housing markets in Vancouver and Toronto, which are already two of the most expensive cities in North America to live in. I mean, the average housing prices in Toronto is well over $1 million for an average house. Same in Vancouver. I don't know why people don't make the connection between supply and demand. Like you bring in 500,000 more people a year, you're going to need hundreds of thousands of houses in addition to existing housing requirements. I don't know how Trudeau or anyone can claim to talk about the cost of housing while almost doubling immigration.
Yes, you're right, Ezra. And, 500,000, it's a lot of people. And actually, I was able to watch an interview that Pierre Poilievre did with the National Post 2 days ago. And he said this country is a huge country. So they can go, in, Newfoundland and other places. But the reality is, and you were right about that, 42% of them, if you look at the data and the statistic, 42% of them are going to Toronto and Vancouver, these two big cities. So yes, that has an impact on the prices of houses over there. And the solution to that is to have sustainable immigration. But these establishment political parties won't speak about that. Poilievre is saying, we must force municipalities to change their bylaws. That's not respecting the Constitution. The easy answer to the prices of houses that is going up in Toronto and Vancouver is to stop mass immigration, and like that will help. And actually, the finance minister said that in an interview a couple of months ago. She said it's mathematical. We need to have fewer people, or we need to build more houses. So the solution is fewer people, and actually, when we are saying that, when these people are going to Toronto and Vancouver, people living in Toronto and Vancouver are leaving these cities. They are selling their houses over there, and they are going to another town or another cities, and prices of houses is going up in these cities. So that's very important. We need to have fewer immigrants, and we cannot tell them, don't go to Toronto or Vancouver. We cannot dictate them where to go. We need to have people that will be with us because they believe in Canadian values, they will share our values, and they will come here to work. But actually, if you look at the data right now, only 26% of them are immigrants that are coming to Canada. They're economic immigrants. That means that, that person will have a job in this country because an entrepreneur was not able to find a Canadian for that job. 26% of skilled immigrants. We must increase that and having fewer refugees. And like you said, people who are crossing the border in my own province in Quebec illegally, 20,000 of them since the beginning of this year. 20,000, they're crossing the border. Do you really believe, Ezra, that their life is in danger in the state of New York when they're crossing with Gucci's and big luggages? No, they're coming here and they are not respecting our borders. If they want to come, they can come crossing the official point of entry, and they won't do that because we will tell them, you're not a refugee, you have to go back to the States. And we are the only party that is saying we must stop that. And I said during the last campaign, we must have a fence, not a wall, just a fence over there, and telling them, if you want to cross and come to Canada, you are welcome, but you just have to cross maybe 500 meters at your right, and you'll have an official point of entry, and you'll be able to cross. But we'll ask you the real questions. You are not a refugee, you must go back. But because of that agreement with the U.S., if they cross an unofficial port of entry, they can claim that they are refugees, and we cannot tell them go back to the U.S. So that's why we need to have a fence. But it's you cannot speak like that in this country. It's not politically correct. But we are doing politics differently, and we need to acknowledge that.
Now, you said that only 26% of these migrants are economic class. Can I ask where you got that statistic from? That's actually a shocking statistic. It suggests that, more than 300,000 people a year will be dependent. They'll either be on welfare, or maybe they will eventually find jobs. But if 74% of those 500,000 people are not economic migrants, then all the arguments for mass immigration that the Liberals and others put forward are not, well, they don't stand up. Where's that figure from, that 26%?
Yes, thank you for asking. In the 75%, you have the refugees, you have the people coming under reunification of family. When you're speaking about reunification of family, it's the big family. You know, we agree that if we are a skilled worker and you want to come here, you can come and you can bring your wife or your husband and your children. That's the immediate family. But that's not what is happening on the reunification of family. You can have your brother, your sister, your grandmom, your granddad. We must stop that. But also, if you are a skilled immigrant and you are coming here, you are the one that will work. Your wife or husband won't work and your children won't work. So it's why, you know, under the skilled immigrants, usually it's only that skilled person. And if you count only that skilled person, it would be 26%. And because the immediate family won't work here in our country. But the data coming from the government, they are including the skilled immigrant and his or her immediate family. That's why they can tell you that, oh, about 50% of them are skilled immigrants. That's not real. The real number is, if you count only that skilled immigrant, it's 26%. And we are in agreement that that person can bring his immediate family, but we must know that, you know, the wife usually or the husband won't work and they are not coming here because we need that person to help us to build our economy. They're coming here because the husband or wife was a skilled immigrant. So that's a big difference. But the official, and if you look at the official data, that's the real statistic. 26% of them are skilled immigrant that when they will cross our border, they will have a job and they will work immediately. And usually, if you look at the data coming from Statistics Canada, it will take between 5 and 10 years for the other members of the family to work in our country.
Well, I tell you, just this conversation we've been having for the last 10 minutes is a conversation that really is nowhere in this country. It's certainly not in Parliament. It's not in the opposition parties, and it's not in the media. I think that the only people who are skeptical about mass immigration are the people. Every poll I've ever seen says that people think the number is too high. Angus Reid does an annual survey on this, and it's practically 10-1, and yet there is no voice opposing it. I want to talk about another controversial subject, about which there's even more conformity. A subject that if you dare to have even a nuanced point of view, not only are you called wrong, which is fine, but you're called a foreign agent of disinformation. And I'm talking about Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And of course, I'm against the invasion. I'm against any war. I mean, certainly against an invasion by Vladimir Putin, a former KGB agent who I think has imperial intentions. I'm obviously sympathetic to the Ukrainian victims of this war. That's the battleground. But how to handle this war, how to respond to it, I think is the subject of a fair debate. I don't think we've had that debate in Canada. Any questions about it are being called disloyal. What is your position on the war in Ukraine? What should Canada do, if anything? And do you have a comment on anything Trudeau has said and done about this war?
Yeah, we must. It's not our war. We must just stop everything that we are doing. Our country is giving money to Ukraine. We are helping Ukraine armies. It's not our war. And like you know, I'm not for that invasion. You know, I'm not a pro-Putin. But when you're speaking about peace and prosperity in our country, the mainstream media would, oh, Bernier is a pro-Putin. No, you just have to look at the history of our country. And the history of our country is a country that is a middle power that will fight for peace and prosperity. And, you know, we were not part of the war in Iraq. And I believe that Chrétien took the right decision at that time. And we need to promote peace. We need to promote a diplomatic solution in Ukraine. We are the only, like you said, national political party that is not pro-war. We are pro-peace. And if you look at what happened in the past, and if you know the history, Khrushchev tried to to have a missile in Cuba in 1962. Actually, last October, that was the 60th anniversary of the Cuba crisis. And at that time, Kennedy said, no, we don't want a communist country that will have missile at our doors. And, that was a big crisis. And at the end, Khrushchev decided not to go ahead with that plan to have missiles in Cuba. And we said, okay. And when I'm saying we, the Western world and the US said, okay. And that was it. But we must remember that Putin was saying the same thing a couple of years and months ago. He said, I don't want any missile in Ukraine. It will be at my doors. And we are we, the Western world, are pushing Ukraine to be part of NATO. If Ukraine is part of NATO, we will have a NATO base in Ukraine at the doors of Russia. And what was good for us in 1962 must be good also in 2022. We must remember that. So let's have a discussion. Let's put all these parties around the same table to have a peaceful discussion. But, it's not mainstream saying that because it's not politically correct. And for us, I believe that would be the best thing for our country to promote peace and prosperity in Ukraine. And it's not our war. We must not be part of that. But these establishment politicians are, because we have 1 million Canadians from Ukraine origin, and they are pandering to them. And that's why I believe we are part of that war right now. We can say no to NATO like Chrétien did, and that must be the position of our country. And it's too bad that it is not. But you can count on us. We will always fight for what is good for this party, for this country, and this party.
I remember when Justin Trudeau was running for prime minister before he won his first election, and he was asked about Canada's CF-18s, which were engaged against the ISIS terrorist group. And one of the very first things Trudeau did before he was even officially sworn in as prime minister is he told Barack Obama at the time that Canada was pulling our CF-18s out, and Obama wanted Trudeau to keep them in. And I remember Trudeau saying, mocking generals pulling out their CF-18s and seeing how big they are, like he was making fun of warmongers. Here's a quick clip of that.
So will you be Jean Chrétien, though? You still want to see the proof is the proof is the proof? Or are you pretty well made up your mind that it would be better for us to stay in a non-combat role?
I haven't made up my mind, but the onus is on Mr. Harper to demonstrate that a shift from a non-combat role that we've established right now to a combat role is the right thing for Canada, the right thing for Canadians, but also the right thing for the international community. There are an awful lot of things that Canada can and should be doing. I mean, think about Canada's reputation around the world and what we've done around refugees. Whether it be the Vietnamese boat people, whether it be the Ismailis in Uganda, in East Africa, whether it be even more recently the Tamil community fleeing a civil war in Sri Lanka. Canada has been a place that draws in and helps refugees in a significant and serious way. Now, in this situation, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of displaced peoples in the region who aren't looking to all, leave the region. That's where their homes are. They need support to get through this very, very difficult time. Canada has a capacity and an expertise in doing just that. Why aren't we talking more about that? Why aren't we talking more about the kind of humanitarian aid that Canada can and must be engaged in, rather than, trying to whip out our CF-18s and show them how big they are? It just doesn't work like that in Canada.
So here was Justin Trudeau, who was very sympathetic, frankly, to returning ISIS terrorists. He said we have something to learn from them. I mean, here's that clip on CTV.
While other countries are prosecuting citizens who went abroad to fight for ISIS, Trudeau believes some returning home to Canada can still be rehabilitated.
There's a range of experiences when people come home, and we know that actually someone who has engaged and turned away from that hateful ideology can be an extraordinarily powerful voice for preventing radicalization in future generations.
That was a shocking thing for him to say. So he was soft on Islamic terrorism with the Islamic State. He pulled out our CF-18s from that battle, even though Barack Obama specifically asked him for it. He denigrated our armed forces. But suddenly that peacenik sounds like a veritable warmonger. I mean, Canada used to be a peacekeeping country. That was one of the liberal brands. I just don't recognize this prime minister we have. He's so butch all of a sudden. He sounds like an army general. I just don't know why the Justin Trudeau of 7 years ago, who was mocking militarism and generals, is now breaking out his toy soldiers and moving them all over the map. I find it unusual.
And you must also remember, Ezra, that we didn't have also the right equipment for our Canadian forces. We did that war in Afghanistan, and at that time I was Foreign Affairs Minister, and I was begging my counterparts, other Foreign Affairs Ministers all across the world, to help us in Afghanistan with resources, with plane, because our Canadian forces didn't have the right equipment, and they still don't. So let's put more money and respect our signature when we said we need to spend 2% of our GDP in our Canadian forces, and we must do that. Having a plan to do that. We won't be able to do that in the first year, but we must have a plan to increase and give our Canadian forces the right resources and equipment. But now we are spending money in Ukraine and sending our equipment over there. We must not do that. And yes, you're right. This country has been known as a peacekeeper, and I believe that is the solution for that crisis that we have in Ukraine right now. But I don't understand Trudeau, and Trudeau is not in line with the Liberals and also the NDP, Ezra. The NDP under Ed Broadbent, they were fighting for peace and prosperity, and now the NDP and Trudeau and the Conservative and the Bloc Québécois and the Green, they're all in that war, and we must save Ukraine. It's not our war. We must not be part of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's certainly a contrarian point of view, and I know it'll get you labeled a foreign agent. I think it already has. I know the University of Calgary, Professor Boucher, Trudeau's disinformation czar, has called you a Putin agent. He's called me that too. I'm not a Putin agent. In fact, I've written a whole book condemning him and Gazprom, but the fact that I don't bend the knee to Trudeau, I guess we've been labeled. Well, listen, Maxime Bernier, great to catch up with you, and you'll be speaking at the Rebel News Live Conference, which is a great thing. We used to do a lot before the pandemic. We're getting back into it again. We're going to have about 15 speakers, each for about 15 or 20 minutes, and we're grateful that you'll be there. If folks want to come and meet you in person, go to rebelnewslive.com, and you can see the ticket prices there for students or seniors. It's a great event. Thanks for coming for that, by the way. It's going to be great.
Thank you, Ezra. I'm very pleased to be there, and I will take that time at that conference to explain a little bit in more details our position on the war in Ukraine, and like I just said, our position for fighting for peace and prosperity. So thank you for having me, and I will see you at that event.
Well, that'll be a great one. And just for the record, we have given invitations to other political leaders from other political parties, including Premier Danielle Smith from Alberta, Premier Doug Ford in Ontario, and Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservative Party. Maxime Bernier, leader of the People's Party, great to see you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Ezra. Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.
You too. There you have it, Maxime Bernier. Stay with us. More ahead. This free episode of the Ezra Levant Show is brought to you by...
Hey guys, have you checked out our Rebel News store lately? You really should, because we're always adding fun things into the store. As the news changes, I guess so does the merchandise. We've got something for everybody. We've got a great selection of pro trucker merchandise, like this excellent honk honk shirt right here that will surely drive all your liberal friends and relatives absolutely crazy, although I don't think the trip is all that far. But right now, in the store, this is my very favorite t-shirt, and I know t-shirts. Free Tamara in support of convoy leader Tamara Leach, as she is treated like a common terrorist by Justin Trudeau's government for her role in the peaceful weeks-long street party against COVID mandates in Ottawa. I've got great news though, if you can't decide which shirt is your favorite, because right now at rebelnewsstore.com, you can use the coupon code FALL, F-A-L-L, and buy 2 t-shirts and get 25% off. And as always, shipping is free. So head on over to rebelnewsstore.com, pick your 2 favorite t-shirts, and save 25%. Thanks, and remember, free Tamara.
Hey, welcome back. Your letters to me. Stay Ray says, hope Elon starts unbanning people soon or I'll grow suspicious of how much he really loves free speech. Prove it. Well, imagine the list of people who would be brought back to life after being sent to Twitter heaven, Donald Trump being the first and most obvious one. You know, even some Rebel News alumni like Tommy Robinson. I wonder if they will be allowed back on the platform. It'll be interesting. Morage01 says, after the not unexpected lackluster performance by the Republicans in yesterday's election, Trump should think twice about running in 2024. You know, that was my monologue today. I mean, I still like Trump and he did amazing things for America. I think he really saved America from Hillary Clinton and from what a continuation of the first Obama presidency would have been. We can see the last 2 years what a Democrat win would have been. And thank God Trump was there. Trump did a great many things, and he was going to do many more until he was defenestrated in 2020. I think there are real questions about American election integrity. The fact that the richest, most modern country in the world can't count their ballots on election night is deeply embarrassing. Of course, some states can. Florida and Texas, 2 of the largest states, had no problem counting them within hours. Why can't Arizona or New York do the same? Brazil just had their presidential election. They counted the results in one night. Why can't America? It only makes you curious about shenanigans. Someone named Canadian Rumble Guy says, Trump's narcissism won't allow him to step aside and let a better person run. He's putting his pride above what America needs to move ahead. Too many Americans who don't like Trump would vote Republican if he wasn't still making it all about him. Trump is going to be the downfall of American democracy. I don't think he's going to be the downfall of American democracy, but I do think that the thing about Trump is Trumpism. Trump is about himself. It's about his personality, his charisma. He takes up all the oxygen in a room. And when he's on and when he's fighting for something important, he's amazing. When he knows what he wants, when there's a deal to get on behalf of Americans, on behalf of the free world, Trump is the guy you want. But when Trump is just talking about Trump, especially in an American economic recession, it just rings self-centered. And I think that a policy wonk like Ron DeSantis, who shows he can win and win Latino voters, I think that combined with him being a generation younger, I think that's a powerful thing. Don't count Trump out. I mean, he's made a lifetime of successes by being counted out. He's fallen down and gotten up more times than most. But I think that the magic, I'm not saying it's gone, but it wasn't evident last night. Hopefully the Republican candidate for governor, Kerry Lake, in Arizona can pull through, and it'd be a bit of a miracle if it could in New York too. There are a few that we shouldn't write off yet, but as a whole, Trump's people, where it counted, did not win last night. How do you lose to a stroke victim? That's our show for today. Until tomorrow, on behalf of all of us here at Rebel World Headquarters, to you at home, good night, and keep fighting for freedom.